Welcome back to Angie and Christie Right Now. Today's guest is an author whose sharp wit and darkly comic storytelling bring thrill and laughter in equal measure. As a powerhouse of talent from the world of comedy and mystery writing, our guest is known for her knack for crafting memorable characters and her razor-sharp wit. And she's built an impressive career in television, working in writers' rooms on over 100 episodes of TV comedy. Most recently, she served as executive story editor for Corner Gas Animated, a beloved Canadian sitcom, where her work earned her a Leo Award nomination, which is an award from the British Columbia film and television industry. Her credits include writing for comedy icons like Michael J. Fox, Brent Butt, and even wrestling legend Bret the Hitman Hart. Her debut novel, Other People's Secret, burst onto the mystery scene last September, garnering high praise and accolades from the New York Times Book Review and nominations for a Lefty Award and Whodunit Mystery Bookstore Book of the Year. This story introduces readers to Baby, a woman navigating a web of booze, heartbreak, and lake-bound secrets, which I promise you will not be able to put down. And there's more. Her upcoming novel, She's a Lamb, promises to captivate fans of dark comedy and suspense. Set against the backdrop of a Vancouver theater production, this edgy, satirical story dives deep into the psyche of Jessamine Saint Germain, a determined actress who believes she's destined for greatness no matter the cost. That book comes out in April 2025, but believe me, I've already pressed the pre-order button. We can't wait to dive into her journey from Toronto to Vancouver to Saskatoon and hear all about what goes on in a writer's room. And so without further ado, we are thrilled to welcome Meredith Hambrock to our podcast. Meredith, thank you so much for being with us. Yay!
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Is there anything that you'd like to add to the biography?
No, that was a great bio. You should be like a hype person or something. I want to steal that and put it on my website.
We will send it to you on tape. You can have it as your background music all the time.
Just rolling.
Yeah.
It was impressive. I was creating your bio and I was like, wow, this is going to be such a great interview. We have so many things to talk about. And I've always wanted to know what goes on in a writer's room especially after watching the marvelous Mrs. Maisel with that writer's room.
Yeah.
So, definitely. But sorry?
It's a lot of snacking. I promise.
Don't destroy the image right now for us.
Actually, that's a little piece of heaven for me right now. Yes. Snacks. Yes. You gotta have snacks.
Yeah.
But our first question is always, how or when did you know you wanted to be a writer?
It's a tough one. I was always very obsessed with stories. And I think that came from my mom. My mom is one of those people who reads like 150 books a year, like has had a Kindle since they were like this big and you had to hold it like this. And it had like a keyboard on it and stuff, like a giant BlackBerry. She loved movies. And so she would always take me to movies, maybe even movies I shouldn't be seeing. She was like, you're smart. It's fine. Let's go see Good Will Hunting. And so I really the stories were always this like huge part of my life. I would get so compelled, especially with early 2000s television, like the Gilmore Girls. I was obsessed with. I was always hanging kind of on a thread. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was another one that I just was really, really obsessed with. And I also love to read, was always reading a ton of different books. I think in part because my dad would monopolize the television on the weekends by watching like football and golf, which is so boring to me. So I had to kind of go off and, if I wanted to watch something, it would have to be, or to, experience a story, it would be through reading. And so I read all kinds of different books. And I just sort of started writing, I used to write little fan fiction scenes from stuff that I liked, not really knowing that fan fiction was a thing at all. Just being like, oh, this is a way that I can kind of play around with the story while I wait for the next iteration, right? Till the next episode or the next book coming out next year or something like that. And I would mess around with that. And then I was always a bit of a free spirit. My parents, I was like, I'm not going to go to university. I'm going to, travel or something. And my parents were like, no, go get a 4-year degree. Both of my parents kind of like had rockier university college experiences. They both were there and I think in and out of college in their 20s. So they were very much into me and they said, we don't care what degree you get, just get something. So I found a creative writing program and I was like, I'm going to do that. So there was one at the University of British Columbia. Yeah. And I went out there and I did an undergraduate degree and a master's degree. And then I was just like, oh yeah, this is what I definitely want to do with my life. And I'll do, basically anything to make it happen.
That's
pretty
so
awesome.
cool. Yeah. Like we've interviewed a few authors in our days,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, very few of the authors that we interview actually go to school with that in mind. So way to go. Like, that's fantastic. Good for you.
Yeah, like I was never a big, like, I don't know. I like getting good grades and stuff, but ultimately I was never like, oh, I love studying this or something like that. I sort of found creative writing. I was like, this seems like it could be fun even. So that was very appealing to me.
And you kept going. That's the thing. You
Yeah.
just kept going.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, what genre were you interested in? Like, as you were going through school and taking all these classes, were you like multiple genres or were you?
Yeah, so the thing that makes UBC creative writing sort of interesting is they know that it's nearly impossible to make a living as a writer. So at the very least, they make you study multiple genres.
Like,
And so I kind of took everything, but at the time, I was only 22, 21, 23. And I mean, at the time you think you're like a grown up, but I was like a kid, very young. So I did my thesis in young adult fiction and I've kind of focused on screenwriting and TV writing. Because back in the day, not that I'm super old, but 18 years ago, they didn't have TV scripts online. Like to read a script was sort of difficult. It was kind of hard to find them. At least, I wasn't a great Googler or whatnot. So to learn about that stuff, you kind of had to take a class or something. So I very much had a very introductory, education in it. But I did write a couple TV scripts, including a very bad spec script for the show 30 Rock before I graduated, which was a lot of fun.
that's very cool, though.
Yeah.
But eventually you did get into TV and TV writing and writers' rooms and all of that. So how did that all come about?
Yeah. So you know what? I have like kind of a frustrating story about this where I just sort of knew somebody who knew somebody who got me my first job as a writer's assistant in a TV writing room. So I had written this 30 Rock spec script and I actually, in hindsight, I think it probably was terrible, but I was in school for 6 years. My confidence was pretty high. And so I submitted that and I knew this, writing room for this kids comedy show in Toronto was looking for an assistant just for the summer. So it was like the final season of the show called Whodunit, which was a show about a teen angel. And it was a lot of fun. It's like a really good learning experience because it was a very collaborative writing room. So they were very open to anybody pitching. And we would co-write all the scripts. So I was
Nice.
writing scenes. Yeah. So I got to actually kind of write on scenes and stuff like that. And a lot of the bigger TV shows, they'll have, the assistant doesn't get to be in the writing room, but I've gotten to be in the room from day one of my career. So that was a very cool learning experience and it was short. So, but a great kind of intro.
So for us normal folk who have this idea in our head of what a writer's room looks like, can you like describe like what does it look like? Is it one room with like one table and lots of chairs? Is it couches? Is it like is it people just throwing papers at each other like what we think it is? Or
Big whiteboard.
I think there's a huge range depending on the budget of the show you're working on. Like if you're looking at a very established TV show that's been on the air for a long time and is at like a big network, I think, the writers all have offices, but there'll be one big room where people come together. There's usually a bunch of monitors, TV monitors on the table, and then there'll be an assistant in the corner who sort of is, the command center. And you're pitching, you're throwing out ideas, people are writing stuff down on the whiteboard. A lot of writers' room use cards to kind of organize episodes.
okay.
This network television is very organized in a scenic way. Yeah, and there's it's usually a pretty casual atmosphere. There can be couches. There's usually lots of snacks. There's usually a fridge with a lot of bubbly water and Diet Coke and that kind of thing. oftentimes there'll be, you know, like the showrunner, the head writer will like sit at the head of the table, and you're all kind of pitching to them and sort of engaging in like one big long conversation that will hopefully kind of help you build out different episodes.
And how long does it usually take when you go through when you're giving the pitches out? Is it like, do you kind of have an idea of what the episode is going to be about before you go in for that particular meeting? Or is this something that at that time you just decide upon?
Yeah, so you know what? I feel like it just varies from show to show, because some shows are like, you know, you'll be trying to do 22 episodes and it's like Law and Order. So every week we're trying to like, you know, solve a very specific kind of crime case. Whereas like there are shows, you know, that are, you know, it's one big story over a season. And that I think I've never been in a room for a show like that, so I'm not sure how they organize it. But generally speaking, your showrunner, your head writer, whoever kind of created the show, at the top of the season, they'll have gone into their network and they pitch out what that season is going to be. And they don't have to know everything, but if there's like a character arc, they'll know kind of, you know, what are the big beats they want to hit for that character? What is the journey that character is going to go on? You know, what are maybe some of the cool episode ideas? You know, it's very salesy. They're trying to get them excited, so they'll give them lots of money. So then you'll come into the writing room and you'll know a little bit about what they talk to the network and sort of what the goals are for the season. And then you can kind of build out your season from there. I'm very much from the episodic world. So we would, you know, so I even worked on some shows that were like 25 episodes, or the season was 25 episodes long, which is a bit of a relic of the past.
I know, it's so sad.
I know, it is so sad because that was fun.
It was fun, you know, it kind of gave you like a long time to get, you know, to really fall in love with characters, I think, and to really get to know them. And so especially, you know, I was in the kids world, so we would oftentimes we were working, come in before this, you know, we start shooting a couple months before and start kind of working out different ideas. You would throw out, you know, think about different things that happened to you at school. And, you know, you'd write that down on, you know, be like, you know, silly costume day or something. And you write that down and put it on the board so that when we don't have an episode idea, you'd kind of come back to those cards and you can sort of start talking about it.
When the show is being filmed, do the writers still make changes to the storyline? Do things happen, you know, during filming that kind of may change what the overall plot was going to be, and you have to revise it as you're going along?
Yeah, so like my experience is a little dated because when I was working in live action, I was working on these kid shows for YTV. We would work on these multi-camera comedies. And so those are shows that are shot on a soundstage with a laugh track in front of a live studio audience. So you've seen those. It's like The Big Bang Theory. It was good. Cheers. Like, you know, it's a lot of like this character walks in and says a joke, and then this character walks in and says a joke. And it's so fun. But to shoot those, you shoot an episode in a week. And so we would be there on set rewriting the scripts every single day, because you have to really workshop the jokes and the actors have to perform them over and over again, so that they can get it right. And so there's a lot of revision that takes place sort of in the moment. But when I worked on Corner Gas Animated, they would get the scripts done and then like way ahead of the animation process. So they would, you know, we would write basically the whole season before they would start animating. And they would also record all the sort of the voice audio track before that they would go to the animators. So the process was pretty different. It was very separate. Yeah. So I got to watch some of the voice recorders with the cast, but some of them would be in Toronto. So yeah, so I got to meet some of them basically and see some of it happen. But all the animating took place in Toronto also. So I was sort of removed from the process. And that was sort of fun for me because it felt like I just came in and got to contribute, you know, my job, and then it was done. I got to kind of go home. The workload was, you know, a little more manageable, so I could write other stuff and, you know, focus on some of my own work, which was great. Sorry.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, while you're doing all of this, like, are you still thinking in the back of your mind, are you still thinking, I would love to write my own book?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love the social element of TV writing. Like that part of it is great. Like having a job with coworkers who are really smart and funny people that you get to like sit around with all day and kind of, you know, you joke around or you know, talk about the news, and people oftentimes are very fun to hang out with. So that part is awesome. And the thing that sort of worked for me for my whole career was that you're not employed 12 months out of the year. Usually on these shows, you get like between 6 and 8 months of employment, at least at the early stages of my career.
Okay.
When I was working on those big kind of 22, 25 episode seasons. And so I would usually have 5 months off between seasons, 4 or 5 months, and I could write at least a draft and maybe I could write books sort of between those seasons. So that worked really well for me. And then when Corner Gas came along, we would actually work in these blocks called writing summits. And so sometimes like we go in and we would work on script stuff for 3 weeks, say, and we would do it on Zoom because it was all during COVID. And then we would work on maybe like 3 episodes together. So we would kind of get them in shape so the writer could go off and really start to write the script. But we would just kind of like work on the story together, work on the comedy, kind of get some of the, the sort of finer details out so that the writer could go off and make it great. And sometimes that would be one of your episodes. So you'd have to go off and write a script, but sometimes not in my case, because I was not the most senior person in that room. So, we would go off for 6 weeks. Someone would be writing a script. Once in a while, you get an email and you would give notes to whoever was working on the script. So you would read their work and you would help them make it better. But ultimately, like I had a lot of free time. So I had like a part-time job at a theater company. Usher. So that's sort of where some of the inspiration for one of my next books comes from. But I also, so I would just work on my own stuff then too. And it was a really nice rhythm that, gave me a lot of time.
How many books have you written? Like,
oh gosh,
including the shelf books, like if you have any shelf books. So
oh no, there was a meme that went around. I want to say like 8, maybe. I will say a lot of them, like I wrote a master's thesis that I don't think is publishable, but that was how I was meant to graduate. So it didn't really fit. I think the problem with a lot of my work is it never really fits very cleanly into genre, age group, the style, or whatever. So I feel like, they're not horrible works of writing. I've always gotten nice notes back from agents and stuff like that when I was, in the early stages querying, but there was just never like I didn't really get the market. And so that made it really hard for me to find, kind of find my way into the business of publishing. And also I was like young and stupid, so I had to kind of, develop my perspective a little bit. So I wrote at least 2 young adult novels that I don't think will ever live.
We all have those books. It's
yes, we
okay.
do. A few of them too, yeah.
I was like, I can write science fiction, having like no science background at all, not knowing anything. I was like, I'll just make it. And then I wrote those 2. And then there was like, at one point in my career, I was like, I want to get an agent. I'm going to work so hard on this book. I think this is the book I've worked the hardest on in my whole life. I put so much of myself into it. And it's the book that got me my agent, Abby Saul, who you've met many other members of the Lark group who are represented by her. And we met when she was sort of starting out the Lark group, actually. And I had this sort of upmarket family comedy novel, I guess I could say. And that one, it just sort of died on submission. And but I got just like enough wonderful feedback from people to like editors and stuff like that made me feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. I just gotta find my way into the industry. And I feel like I'm always sort of sneaking in the side window a little bit when I get a book deal. But so I'll say no, I think, and then there was another YA novel I wrote in my undergrad. So 3 YA that are dead, and then this one, so 4 plus these 2. So 6 total, but I think there's more. I tried to make a list one day, and I think there's some. You abandon stuff.
Yeah, you just leave it.
Right? You just have to go to your computer.
So, was the voice in the earlier stories and the voice that you have now with your newest books, was it the same type of? Because you're very upbeat and like comedy, and it just flows on the page. So, is it this? Did your writing style change with the other YA books compared to the adult books?
I think I've always been very readable. And I say that as I think some people think that might be a bit of a diss. But something I've always been told is that I'm very fast on the page. People just always, and sometimes it's good, I think, and sometimes it's bad. So learning how to kind of slow things down has been, a bit of a skill thing. So I think like when we talk about the stuff that we're like innately good at, it's definitely for me has always been that kind of like smooth, very readable writing style. But I was never great at plot also. I feel like I really did not understand how to plot a novel. My creative writing education was great for like nurturing the kind of like literary qualities in my work, but not necessarily great for just like learning the mechanics of plot and like the kind of fundamentals of drama. And so that really came a lot later, I think, when I started working in television. And I think I have been raised by people with a really goofy sense of humor. Like that's just sort of a family trait. But I think I tried to take myself really seriously for a long time. And working in comedy really sort of brought out that more kind of comedic side. But it's definitely like, I think, innate to my family and my personality. One of my grandfathers is like famous for, he met my grandmother when he went to a church dance wearing ski boots. Just this picture of him wearing ski boots at a dance. Like, this is a hilarious gag. It's so dumb. That's so funny. And so just like when you think of something that really defines who a person is, I'm like, that's that's who it is. So I embrace the goofiness, I guess.
I love that. I love that. And I think I agree with Angie. Like you were very readable. Like I started your book and the next thing I knew I was already like way in, And the other thing that I really like is your description nails it every time. Like you describe the bar. I don't think it's spoilers to talk about the bars and other people's secrets. And immediately there's a bright picture of what that place looks like that pops into your head. So I think that, yeah, you're very good at those. So
really good. Like I'm envious of your ability to create a scene because you just tie in the details, but it's not overwhelming. It's not,
exactly.
What is it where people say show, not tell? You pretty much show what the scene looks like, which is really
Yeah. No, it's
Oh,
very
thank
good.
you. Yeah,
No.
I was edited very well. I will say I cut a lot out of other people's secrets. It was a lot longer initially, and I had a really great editor named Sarah J. Henry, who's this sort of kind of flying under the radar crime editor at Crooked Lane Books, who she's also a novelist and I think really knows the genre. And so she helped me a lot kind of refine this because I wasn't always imagining it as like a crime first novel. I always sort of approach things from like a character point of view. So she really helped me kind of understand genre a bit more and kind of got me hooked on it in a way that I hadn't been before.
So you get your agent with another book that dies on submission, and then is Other People's Secrets the next one that you write?
I had this other one that I was sort of working on about like kids in their 20s kind of traveling around Europe, like backpack, and around Southeast Asia. And it just didn't really it was sort of like The Beach. I don't know if you've that was a book first before it came to film. It was kind of like in sort of circling around that, but I couldn't really make it work. I don't know what was going on. So I abandoned that one. And then I was watching a lot of crime television shows and also just sort of wanting, for me, always I think the thriller genre is awesome, but it is very geared toward this sort of kind of like a more traditional woman audience, I guess, where they talk a lot about, suburbs and secrets, the nuclear family, or it's like FBI stuff. And people who do that stuff do it so well, but it was never the thing that really interested me about genre writing. And I've always been on a quest to sort of see more, more unique representations of women on the page. So especially I say outside of who they are to other people, what are these internal journeys that, that I can take these women characters on that kind of, I think, expand our idea of what it means to be a woman. So that was sort of the kind of way I approached Other People's Secrets, is I really wanted to kind of focus on this sort of young woman who she's in her 20s and she's sort of selfish and a little troubled, and she's kind of on the brink of having to grow up and not really knowing how to do that, I guess.
Fighting it the whole way is what she's doing.
Nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. How do we, be, how do you be in community with other people, and how are you kind of show up for your community and, sort of grow up. And so that was sort of how Abby had initially pitched the joke. It was how we're going to watch this young woman grow up in a spectacular way. So that was kind of the approach, because I was sort of on the brink of turning 30 and my career was not going well. And I was, my friends, I was having a lot of fun. But needing to kind of refocus, I think, my priorities in my life a little bit and some of my habits. So I've had a couple of really nice conversations with people in Saskatchewan who are like, "Is this about you?" And I'm like, "No."
Were you found in a dumpster
on a bag of flaming hot Cheetos?
Are you alcoholic? And
seriously,
not at all. I'm I'm a very, I think, at least I see myself as being a sort of bit of a reserved person. And so I like writing about these very over the top, kind of out there women characters, I think, as a maybe an outlet. I don't know.
But that's the fun of being a writer, right? You get to like completely create something that is absolutely not what you are. So good
Yeah.
on you.
I know, and the characters are so interesting because, I mean, first of all, like the naming system itself,
Yes.
just the names of the characters. I don't know
Where'd
how.
you get that?
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of pulled a little bit from a little bit, I think it's sort of my comedic eye coming through in that I feel a little like I grew up, pretty middle class, like very, had a pretty easy life, I think, compared to a lot of people. And so I felt a little bit like a fraud coming into crime fiction and writing about people in more desperate, difficult circumstances. And so I thought, why not just make the world feel a little elevated so that it feels a little bit, it feels a little unique and special and almost a little bit like I was saying like a dirtbag fairy tale. Um, there's like a real kind of like aesthetic sensibility to it that lets it sort of, I think, live as a story and not, I think, really intrude on the sort of like world of like gritty noir that I think is, really rooted in, I think, sometimes people's lived experience, and that's what makes it really resonate. So I was trying to kind of do something with the aesthetic world to make it feel really unique and voicey, which is sort of also what I want like readers to get excited about when they see a Meredith Hambrock book, I guess.
It's funny because when I started reading it, it reminded me of the Goonies. I felt like it was adult Goonies, like that,
A
just that
little.
community, the kids, how they
Yeah.
come together. Just that's what it feels like.
So true. Now that you say it.
Right?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've heard Goonies, I've heard what's it called? Empire Records, also the sort of like damn the man kind of sensibility, sort of like kind of elevated characters.
Mhm.
And yeah, I love that comparison. And I think part of it too is it's a little bit about nostalgia, and about how you can look at your life, sort of like look back at, the way you've been living and sort of see it differently. And so there's sort of like a bit of a tonal shift, I think, at one point in the book that, echoes that a little bit. So it was, it was intentional, but it is like, it's very in your face. And so people are always like, curious about where it came from. But also just the DJ kind of overall thing. I was at a bar in, cottage country, and the DJ was wearing overalls, and we called him DJ Overalls. And that just sort of stuck with me. And I also just love the idea of this like really sort of like loose, cool looking character being actually a real kind of tight ass. So being a little more uptight and a little more of a control freak. So
But I love it because at the same time, like you just read her name and you know exactly what this woman is about. So it's like it's awesome. Like the whole I totally
And then you get into it and you're like, oh, there's something more to those overalls too, right?
correct. Yes.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I really like about your characters is that they are multidimensional, even though they kind of seem kind of surfacey when you first start reading because of their experience and how they interact with one another. But then you start delving and diving into, their interactions and why they're doing the things that they're doing and why they love the resort so much and want to stay together and not really wanting to grow up. And I mean, those are really fascinating things to try and, as we're reading the book, find out about these people. So it's kind of, I'm kind of
Yeah. Well, and I think there is sort of like, I treat it with sometimes a bit of humor and lightness, but I also see sort of like joy as a survival strategy, like when things get really hard. And I've sometimes a hard time reading books that are about, people in difficult circumstances that are really joyless, because I don't like this idea that you don't get to be happy if, your life isn't going well. You can still, I think a lot of people use humor as a way to cope, when things are tough. And so I see it as sort of like a really humanizing quality. And I don't think that, I don't think humor cheapens depth or our humanity. I think it always brings, can reveal a lot more about a person. So yeah, I mean, that's just like a style choice of mine, not to hate on those sorts of books, but yeah, that's definitely what I will always bring, I think, to my work.
It's lovely the way that you bring it out. And also, like, I mean, all of us read because we want to sometimes escape. So you kind of need that. personally like the books where there's a little bit of humor to snap you out of it every once in a while. You need it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But-
totally. Yeah.
those are my
So
favorite kind.
yeah, no, absolutely. That's the way that you and I write too. So it
I
works.
know, right?
But so this is a question that Angie likes to ask, and now I've been it's stuck in my head now. I want to ask every writer this, and it's kind of a mean question because like as a writer myself, I know that if somebody asked me that, I'd be like, I can't answer that, but I'm gonna ask you anyway. Who's your favorite character?
Oh, in Other People's Secrets?
Uh-huh.
Like in my own work? Oh, I mean, I gotta say Baby. I mean, I think she's really funny. Like I think a lot of people say, like a lot of people of all kind of walks of life have read this book, and so many people come up to me and say, "Oh, I just hate the main character." And I never really know what to say because I understand it, I guess, from an intellectual level, but I also think she's very funny and fun, and I do think she's trying her best, even though it's oftentimes her judgment is poor. But you know, I have a lot of empathy for her, so I don't know. She makes me laugh, I would say.
I think everybody has a little bit of baby in them, so it's a good thing.
Well, and as a
I
writer,
think like a scamp a little bit. That's how
but I mean, she must have been just so
Sorry,
much
go
fun.
ahead.
Oh no, I would totally interrupted. I was just gonna say, she just seems like she must have been a lot of fun to write. Like just to be able to be in her head and put that on the page. That you probably.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of like women in my life who I would say are sort of they have scamp energy. They like to break the rules, but not in a way that like Baby would necessarily all the time, but like just in a way that pushes the envelope a little bit. And I think that is a quality that I really like in somebody who's like willing to sort of stand up to authority a little bit and just sort of learning to maybe do it for the right reasons is the is the journey a little bit here.
I was kind of curious about the writing style itself, like because it's written in is it third person present?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think I've really read a lot of books written in that tense. What made you decide to do that?
Yeah, so I have heard from a few people also who are like, "This sucks, I hate it," which
I love it.
I think part of it is you write screenplays in that tense, and it does help, I think, with that sort of imagery that we talked about. I like the idea of third person. I liked it feeling like almost it gave it this like elevated feeling, and yet we're telling this sort of like trashy story. So I like that kind of contrast. I love a little bit of high-low. I also, for me, I think this is a weird mental trick. It's that when you are writing in the past tense, someone is telling the story, and so that person is alive, right? Usually in the story, unless they're revealed to be a ghost or something throughout. And I feel like it almost allows you to create more tension when you're in an immediate moment because you're kind of with the character. But it does pose, I think, some issues. Stylistically, some people just don't like it. I think, yeah, so it is like a real, you don't have that like story time feeling to it. So for you, the writer, there's a lot of pressure on you to be creating really compelling drama and kind of the moment to moment. So some traditional thriller writers don't love this book because it is a little bit meatier, I guess, like prose wise. But I did do a lot of work again with my editor at Crooked Lane, Sarah, to kind of like cut out more of the sort of like literary language to really make sure that the conflict and stuff was really like living on the page. And she was really just like, be brutal. That kill your darling. So she's just like, anything that is just, clever for cleverness sake, get rid of it. And I'm sure I failed. I failed a little bit, I think there. I kept so like maybe more than I should have, but ultimately it did really, I think, serve the story well. And I'm really happy with how it turned out.
It always does, but you never want to kill those darlings, darn it, because they're so cool.
Yeah, yes, all the little and I was creeping on some early reviews of my next book, She's a Lamb, and someone said there are a lot of little clever lines in this one.
Love those. Love those.
But they seem to be like they were funny enough that it was okay. Seemed to be their conclusion they came to.
Oh my gosh.
It's strange because as a reader, I've never there's present, there's past, there's first person, like, I mean, it might like strike me in the first paragraph, but after that, like, I mean, you're just reading a story. You're in, especially the way that you write a story with like the descriptions and the characters so vivid that, like, to me, it doesn't matter at that point who or how. It's just, I just want to know what's going to happen. So it's perfect.
I know. I
But
dreamt about it last night.
oh, look at you.
No, seriously, I was like,
Oh.
ooh, I was like in the world for a little bit. Like I was like, yeah, because it just really stuck in my head. I mean, there was this one moment where one of the characters, I can't remember which one, they're about to eat soup out of yogurt
Containers.
cups, and she's picking a dried up piece of cereal from the table. Like, and I'm like, that imagery is just it's so vivid. Like, I just love that about your writing. I do. So
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take your writing apart. What's a good writing day for Meredith? Is it an 8-hour stint? Is it a 2-hour stint? Is it 1,000 words, 500 words? What does it look like for you?
You know, it can really vary. I haven't drafted in a while, but when I'm drafting something, like kind of getting the words down on paper, I try to do like 1,500 words a day. I have to write in the morning, usually starting like 8:30, 9, depending. And I'm not really precious about it. So I try to get, 1,500 words down. And I've kind of experimented with my process for my latest book where I wrote from a really detailed outline, thinking that it would like solve all my problems. I was like, great, this will be wonderful. And so what I was able to do, I think, was get more words down in the morning. So I could usually get maybe 2,000, 2,500 on a good day to sort of just get that down on paper. But yeah, so usually when I'm drafting, and I really like to, when I can do it every day, I try really hard to. Sometimes like my work schedule won't allow it, or, life stuff happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, really like to try to do that when I'm drafting. And then when I'm revising, I can do I'll work 9 to 2 or so. Sometimes you lose steam around like lunchtime, but that's sort of the dream. And then like, again, if I can, I always have the last like 5 years, I've had a lot of variance in my work schedule just through teaching and other, I did a little bit of TV development, and then I was the writer in residence at the Saskatoon Public Library last year. So just sort of kind of working around that schedule, but I've had a really productive few years also.
Nice. So on a regular book, then, do you find yourself writing an outline, or you just sit down at the computer and get going like a pantser?
So it's really evolved, actually. I try different stuff all the time. I think I really like to embrace. I read this book on revision called Refuse to be Done by Matt Bell, and he doesn't really talk about this so much in that book, but I ended up following him on Twitter after that, and he said that as a writer, you should embrace becoming a process and not a product, because that's how you not feel bad, I think, is the idea, or at least my interpretation of that tweet was, if your book doesn't sell, it doesn't matter, because you are not a product, you're a process. So you just try something new. And so for the book that I signed with my agent, Abby, that never sold, that one, I totally pantsed it, I would say. And I don't know. I mean, we both really love that book, but it was really hard, and I don't think I revised it as well as I could have.
Okay.
And so for Other People's Secrets, I tried to at least have like a story arc planned out. But then I got to the end of my plan and the book was only halfway done. So oh, wait a minute, hold on. So I was consistently kind of revising my outline as I went, and also sometimes sort of rebelling against this and being like, oh, this idea was actually really stupid. I don't like how it's showing up on the page, and just deleting stuff and being like, that's dumb. Let's try something new. So a very loose kind of idea, and then coming up with the end, like the twist act that I came up with, when I was writing the second draft, maybe. So
Nice.
that kind of refocused the whole book, and then you have to go back and sort of make it make sense. And then for She's a Lamb, I definitely tried that sort of similar process again. And it didn't really work that well also. It definitely was sort of, there's some things that I think sort of lived, but that one was more, I would just say, if I was to look back on the process of, I was like mostly pantsing, I guess I would say. And then for the book that I'm just finishing up now, I would say I definitely plotted it, thinking it would make things so much easier. And I don't know. I actually have no idea if it did. I think there is something really to freeing yourself up to feel kind of spontaneous when you're writing, to not feel really hemmed in. But I will say people have read this, early readers of this one have liked it so far. So I'm sure.
Very nice. There's something to be said about not being so rigid with your outline. I have learned recently. So,
And there's something to be said about having an actual outline.
right.
Also learned.
So,
Yeah, it's a good thing. So let's talk about your next book, She's a Lamb, that's coming out in April 2025. First of all, the title. Can you explain it a little bit?
Ooh,
So it is inspired. So the book takes place on during a production of a musical like stage production of The Sound of Music.
Okay.
And the title is actually from the song How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria?
Okay.
Where the nuns are talking about how Maria is this awful nun because she likes to like climb trees and scrapes her knee, and she's a little messy. And there's a point where there's sort of the nuns are kind of yelling at each other, kind of, and one says she's a darling, one says she's a demon, and one says she's a lamb. And so that, and sometimes people who know the musical quite well slide into my DMs and they're like, I know that line.
So, absolutely. We all sang that song. Well, my age group all sang that song. So awesome. I actually can't wait to read about it. But where did you get this idea from?
Yeah, so I was working as an usher at a theater company in Vancouver. And this was actually, Other People's Secrets was not doing well in submission. So my agent Abby was kind of trying to sell it, and the editor response was really bad compared to my first book. They were not liking it. And so I was very frustrated. And I'd also been working as, doing this part-time job at this theater company for a long time. And it was a really great part-time job because you get to watch the plays and the musicals over and over again. So as a writer, you're like, oh yeah, like you can really kind of dig in. But you also have to watch the musicals over and over again. And it could get quite grating sometimes. And I had been doing the job for a long time. The shine was off the rose a little bit. And I was going into this production of The Sound of Music. I was going to work it. And I was full of dread for various reasons, for some things that had happened to me in my personal life, and just my career wasn't going so well. So I had sort of, just sort of bummed out. And a producer had asked me for a Hallmark movie pitch because I also screenwriter, trying to get my screenwriting career going. And so I was like, oh, like maybe something on the set of a play would be interesting. So I wrote up this pitch and I sent it to her, and she was like, no, this isn't, probably not for Hallmark. But I liked the idea. And I was like, well, I'm sad. It's Christmas time. I have to work a lot. I have to watch this musical over and over again. I'm going to write a romantic comedy. And then I started writing this character who was just like she's this super ambitious actor, incredibly entitled, incredibly snarky, mean, but like has this rock solid belief that she's meant to be a star. And she was so funny on the page. I got to about, page 50, and I was like, oh, this is not a romantic comedy. There's something going on. And she's sort of kind of grappling with this feeling that I think a lot of young artists sort of feel, and maybe like, people at all stages of the career, like, is this a waste of time? Have I been, doing this all for nothing? Is all of the work that I put in, is it ever going to amount to anything? Like these sort of like feelings of kind of failure, which is sort of what I was feeling kind of in the moment. And then as I revised the book, there's a lot, it's a real kind of like psychological suspense thriller, sort of shades of horror story of this woman who has this real kind of rock solid deep belief that she is meant to be a star, and sort of what how that changes her as a person. So I don't want to spoil anything, but it is
good
because I so want to read that book. Oh my gosh.
But I would say it's on the one hand, it's a lot, I think, funnier than my first one, but it is also, I think, a lot darker as well, because it kind of wades into, lots of questions about ego and about delusion and that relationship to being an artist. And yes, I'm really kind of excited. But the early response has been quite good, because and people seem to be responding well to the stuff that I like, which is, voice and also really wild plot. I'll just say that. I love a big juicy plot.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Mm.
So, last question before we move on to our speed round question is if you could speak to all the new authors out there and tell them one thing that they could do to help out their career, what do you think that would be?
Read, read more, read a lot more, read more books than you're writing by 100. No, maybe that's too many, but I think read and really start to look at, try to figure out where your book sits on the shelf and who you're writing. And I say this to, I kind of do some creative writing instruction, and I tell people to, there's the market stuff, which can be frustrating, where you're like, my book is so agents and editors sort of sell books using comps. So I don't know if you've heard this before, but comparable titles. So you'll be like, my book is this book meets that book. And that is like a market question. But I think there's a way for us as writers to reframe that as a creative question. So who is my work in conversation with? Who am I, kind of commenting on, or who am I, like what someone's like, ended, if a book is the end of a sentence, is mine the next sentence? Maybe, like, is there a way to sort of view your work, as being kind of or vibes, kids love to talk about vibes. So who are you vibing with, right? Because these questions can be sort of like aesthetic or esoteric. They don't have to be sort of just about plot. So to really kind of, I think when I sort of started thinking about reaching readers just a little bit more, you don't have to sacrifice everything, but maybe giving, 10% more of my focus to what books are people reading and how, where do they sit on the shelf. That has helped me a lot, I think, in just sort of reframing my career and like kind of keeping the stuff that feels like a Meredith book, but also finding a way to make it happen. If that's the goal, I think a lot of people just write for the joy of getting to, spend time with characters you love, or situations or plots, or your own voice, or just even like having a conversation with your like subconscious. I think it can sometimes be. So to sort of embrace that too, just be like, do I really want publishing, or do I just want to nurture my love and sort of for this and sort of see where it goes? And they're all valid pathways.
Yeah, that's
Best
true.
book to write is the one that you want to read, right? So like whether or not it sells, who cares at that point? Just write what you feel like and let's go from there. But I love what you answered. I love that answer. Reading to me is the answer to a lot of problems, period. So just pick up a book and read.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've had a lot of conversations with like writers who are, in the earlier stages of their career in the last couple of years. And so, yeah, I have a ton to say about it, but I'll try not to say too much. But yes, clarifying what you want out of it, what your goals are, can just be so helpful. It just helps you orient, sort of North Star.
We're going to go to a top 10 speed round kind of questioning where our listeners can get to know you as a person instead of just the writer that you are. Are you ready? Okay. The first one is, are you chronically late or systematically punctual?
I'm punctual, but I'm stressed about it, like getting there on time. I'm always running late.
But you are punctual. That's what matters. And it's a thought that counts. So on a night out with friends, are you the first to go home or the last one to leave?
I think I used to be the last one to leave, but now I'm getting to being the first one.
Yep, I know that feeling. But number 3 is, have you ever won a bet?
Oh, I think I try to make people bet me, but I'm very confident, and that usually scares them away. Like $100, I know I'm right, and they'll be like, "Yeah, okay, right. I don't want to lose $100."
You only make bets if you know you're gonna win.
Number 4 is, have you ever bumped into someone or something while you were texting?
Probably. I'm gonna say probably. I don't remember. I can't remember it exactly. I think yeah, I would say probably. And I've tripped off a curb. I can say I definitely have tripped off a curb.
Done that too. And my husband has saved me from a lot of bumps and bruises for sure. So number 5 is, which part of the day do you like the least?
The morning.
And that's when you write, though.
Yes, I know. I think it's that's why I like it now. But if, generally I don't like to make plans in the morning.
Very nice. Would you rather visit your ancestors in the past or meet your descendants in the future?
Oh, probably the past.
Cool. Why? Get to know where you're from.
Well, I don't think I'm gonna have children, so I don't know if
Or
that
your
would be.
like other family members or your,
Well, then definitely the future. I want to see if people can fly and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's both. Like, I mean, if you could do both, I think that would be the perfect mix, right? Like you get to see the people that you come from and what it
Mhm.
leads to, if we're even still alive, at that point. So
It's not looking good sometimes.
number 7 is a fill in the blank. So it's mid-afternoon and you've got the munchies. You reach for
Chocolate.
like a good writer should.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dark chocolate, milk chocolate.
Probably something with nuts. If I, if it's,
That's
if
a
I
killer right there.
like,
I'm craving a Carmela bar right now.
ooh. Oh, I don't know if we have those in Canada. What is that?
It's the chocolate with caramel, like milky, like creamy caramel in the
Oh,
middle.
tasty.
Yeah, when you bite it and it just kind of flows out like.
That sounds really good.
That sounds too good for lunchtime. Yum. What was your very first job?
Oh man, and on topic, I worked at a Hershey booth at the Canadian National the CNE's in Toronto is the exhibition. It's like I think it came from like farmers exhibitions, but it's at the end of the summer I think we worked like 21 days straight. And we would sell at this Hershey booth in a food building. You would sell 8 chocolate bars for $3. No, 6 chocolate bars for $3. And so I would have all these like memories of just bagging chocolate bars, or like these not memories, nightmares of bagging
nightmare chocolates.
Yeah, and then to this day, I can also, if you name it her Hershey bar, I can tell you what's in it.
That's so cool, though. It must have smelled delicious. That's for sure.
That would have been a tempting place.
I know.
Days of chocolate.
Yeah.
That sounds like heaven.
Yeah. It was a fun job as a teenager too, because it's all
yeah. And for the price too.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to sleep in late on the weekend?
6. Let's say. I try to sleep in, but I think I'm a real habit person. So if I had my druthers, I'd sleep in more.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the last question is, what are your thoughts about pineapple on pizza?
I'm a huge hater of hot fruit in any iteration. My friends all think I'm a psychopath. But
gross.
No Hawaiian pizza for Meredith. That's a no.
No. Yeah. Big no for me.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much for answering those.
Yeah, that was fun.
Meredith Hambrock reads her jacket cover for Other People's Secrets.
Baby's heart is in the right place, but she's got problems, namely a fierce taste for booze and an on-again, off-again boyfriend who can't commit. She's living and working at Oakwood Hills, a crumbling lakeside resort with her friends Crystal Nugget and DJ Overalls, reeling since her adoptive mother died of a stroke. And now the return of the local drug kingpin, Bad Mike, is about to throw her already unstable summer into full-blown chaos. To make matters worse, the owner of Oakwood Hills announces plans to sell the resort to Amelia, her boyfriend's wealthy twin sister, who plans to renovate it, sucking the life out of the only home Baby's ever known. Desperate to thwart the sale, Baby and her friends decide to try to recover a sunken treasure rumored to be sitting at the bottom of the lake. But Bad Mike also has his eyes on the prize, and when the search gets criminal, Baby will be forced to walk down a road full of hidden secrets that will change how she sees herself and her life forever. Way forward.
So you had mentioned that you are finishing up a project. Can you speak about that a little bit, or is it top secret right now?
I think I'm still in top secret mode. I will say this one is a more sort of traditional thriller.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Where can people find you on like social media?
So I mostly hang out on Instagram now, at Meredith Hambrock Books. I still have a Twitter. Who knows what will happen? Maybe Elon will go to jail and then we can have it back, because I do really miss the community of writers on Twitter. I think, writers are words people. They're not photo people or video people as much. So I do kind of miss the gang and hanging out there. So I don't know. I'm a like eternal optimist that maybe it'll come back in a way that's a little more friendly and a little less scary. So we'll see. So that I'm at Meredith Hambrock 1H on Twitter as well. Still kind of.
Come and join us on Threads. It's actually really cool. Come on.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've been struggling to figure it out with how you tag stuff and everything. So I'm gonna give it another go.
Sounds good. We'll follow you immediately.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want you to remind everybody about your upcoming book in April so that we can promote that.
Yes. So there's She's a Lamb is coming out April 8th, 2025. Yeah, follow me on Instagram for more details about that if you need. I also have a link tree there that has pre-order links if you like the sound of it. It's available in Canada, basically wherever books are sold in the States. I think it should be wherever books are sold in the States as well. It's distributed by Simon & Schuster there. So
Nice.
yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, so exciting. I'm so happy for you. And I'm going to wish you luck on the future project that we can't talk about because it's undercover. But I'm sure it's going to be equally awesome. So just thank you so much for coming on the show. Definitely come back again. Like,
I would love to. Thank you so much. This was such a fun chat.
awesome. Yeah, we'd love to have you back. Please like, subscribe if you enjoyed the videos, and come back again. Like we'd love to have you
Had a
all.
great conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's super fun.